The American writer, academic and self-declared bad feminist Roxanne Gay, how she found her voice and set the literary world on fire. Hello and welcome to 1+1. I'm Jane Hutchin. Roxanne Gay's success has been described as unexpected and delicious. She writes incisive essays that polarise opinion and labels herself a bad feminist because she sees herself as flawed. She's written short stories, a collection of essays and a gripping novel, An Untamed State, based in Haiti where her parents were born. This interview was the final one of her recent tour in Australia. Roxanne Gay, welcome to 1+1. You enjoy Twitter and you looked at our commercials on TV soon after you arrived. You said meat is big here, commercials are not very diverse and make the US look like the promised land, and white men are butch and strapping. What do commercials tell you about a place?
I think they tell you what the culture values and what the culture strives to be, and so I've been intrigued by Australian commercials. I'm obsessed with Uncle Toby.
How so?
Well, there's a commercial where Uncle Toby said, and he's not really Uncle Toby, but I call him Uncle Toby, says that more people wake up to their tech than each other. And so he's trying to make you feel like you need to have a good morning with Uncle Toby cereals. And he just wears like this short, like dark green shirt, and he's just like a butch, just short haircut. I'm a man. And I just love it.
When I was in China, I used to notice that a lot of the commercials there were kind of like, well, aspirational, as you've said. It was like the perfect lifestyle. Mm-hmm. People would want things like big TVs, washing machines, and yet there was probably no chance a lot of people would get those in a while. Is that fairly typical, do you find?
I think so. Commercials make us want. And they make us want to work hard enough to get that which we want. And so, yes, absolutely.
And in terms of being a reflection, an accurate reflection of a society, have you found that the commercials you saw bear out in the people that you've met here?
No, I think commercials show what marketers think a country prioritizes, and I'm sure there's results to back that up. But I've met a lot of fascinating people, and when you walk down the street, especially in Melbourne and Sydney, it's really more diverse than you would think. Especially there's a significant Asian population here, and the TV commercials don't give any indication of that. It's like you're in two different worlds, and I think that's what really struck me when I started seeing the commercials on TV. And where are people of color? Where are brown people? Where are indigenous people in these commercials? It's surprising that you can walk down the street and see more diversity than you can when you turn on your television.
You've also said that Australian broadcasters are hilariously, unabashedly sexist.
Yeah, I was watching this show called Today this morning. Love it. And a woman had brown hair, brunette hair, and she was talking about something named Chico.
A roll?
Yes, a Chico roll. A dim sum? Yes, and she apparently back in the day was a spokesmodel for them, and she had blonde hair, and she was busty, and I don't even think she realized they were going to do this, but they showed the picture of her promoting Chico, and then her two male colleagues were just like very, look at that, no, I'm not going to comment, but they were sort of leering and weird, and I just was laughing. I was like, they don't even care that they're being sexist, and she didn't seem thrilled with the conversation, but she played along with it, and she said, how do you like me as a blonde? And I just remember thinking, oh, this is pretty sexist.
You were born in Nebraska to
Yes.
Haitian parents who moved to the US when they were 19.
Yes.
What motivated them to leave Haiti?
They came here separately, but I think for the same reason, for opportunity, and because many other members of their family had already come over, and so they wanted to join their families. And my father, in particular, came to pursue an engineering degree, and my mother also came to go to school.
What did they find particularly difficult about their lives in America?
When they were younger, my mom said the culture shock really stunned her, and it took her a couple years to really adjust to the difference in culture between Haiti and the United States and the language barrier, even though she knew English and she understood English and was able to speak it. It's just the culture shock and the barrier, and hearing a foreign language constantly. I think that takes an adjustment, and I think there's a certain level of trauma to leaving the country for another.
What did they teach you about privilege? Because from everything I've read about Haiti, it is a place where there are deep divisions, privilege and poverty.
Yes.
How did they inform you about that?
I think they led more with actions than words. It's not something they talked about a lot, but they always made us understand that we were lucky and that we enjoyed things that many other people did not, and that we should never take it for granted.
So how do you do that? Because a lot of parents of young kids are desperate to make their children feel as if they're lucky.
Well, going to Haiti in the summers let us know we were lucky, because we would go and have a blast. We'd go to the mountains and the beach and have fun, but you could also see abject poverty. You can't avoid it. And so to know that the luck of birth made that not your life, it made it pretty easy to understand that we were lucky.
You weren't allowed to have sleepovers, I understand, and they were pretty strict on homework.
Yes.
You've sort of dubbed yourself, or people have dubbed you, the bad feminist after your essay, but you also describe yourself as a child as a good girl. What did being a good girl mean?
Back then it meant doing exactly what you were told and going to church and behaving and trying not to fight with my brothers, though we fought like cats and dogs. It was just about making sure I was following the rules and being the best I could be. And the older I got, the more I realized that it's very difficult to be a good girl. And so I started to maybe be not so good.
You and your family moved around a lot because your dad's work took him to different places. Is that something that you had to cope with?
Absolutely. On the one hand, I loved it because we were always in new and exciting places, and the one common thing was my family, and we get along, so that was nice. On the other hand, it's always a new place, and I don't succeed much in making friends, especially back then. And so it would be very difficult to have to start over in a new place every year or two.
What about reading and writing? Was that kind of like a solace for the constant moving that you did?
Because you could move anywhere, but Laura Ingalls was constant. And so like Little House on the Prairie, that series of books was home, and books were home because I could lose myself in the stories of others. And so I read constantly, and my parents indulged my reading habit quite a lot. And they never even monitored my reading. So long as I was going to the library, I used to take a wagon and go to the library to get books, and they were just so happy that I loved to read.
What about, apart from Laura Ingalls, and I completely get that because I was mesmerized by her too, who were the kind of characters that you were drawn to?
I loved anything about young girls that I could relate to, and so I read The Girls of Canby Hall, which was a series of books about boarding school. I read Sweet Valley High, which is total trash, but I loved it. Oh, and Anne of Green Gables was also one of my favorites.
You told me a while ago that you were tired because you'd been up late finishing a lecture for your students.
Yes.
You're an associate professor of English at Purdue University.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about your students?
Yes, my students are wonderful. It's the best part of my job, and it's why I still teach. I don't know how much longer I'm going to do it, but I've stayed in the profession because my students invigorate me. I love working with them. They're so generous, and they're so willing to take chances, and that makes me feel more empowered to take chances in my own writing. And even though I'm teaching, I'm always learning from them, and they're gutsy, and they're smart asses, and they're annoying, and they're hilarious, and all of it, I'm here for it.
You've said that media literacy is very important. Why do you try and impart that to your students?
I think that it's important for them to understand the culture that they consume. You can enjoy it. Lord knows that I do. I watch lots of toxic, terrible television and listen to terrible music, but I recognize that it's terrible in addition to what I enjoy about it. And I want to make sure my students, both the young men and women, understand some of the troubling messages that they're receiving. And so it's important to talk about media literacy while also letting them know that it's okay to just be entertained once in a while.
Can you give me an example of the troubling messages that you like to make your students aware of?
Definitely. Anytime there's a message that promotes a controlling, sort of abusive relationship, but it's not framed as abusive, it's framed as romantic, where possession is passionate, I think we have to look at that and wonder why. Where women are encouraged to believe that there is a Prince Charming and a happily ever after, I think we have to look at that and consider why, and consider that the reality of relationships, it can feel like a fairy tale, but there's always going to be the other side of the fairy tale. Life is never perfect all the time. And so they need to understand that there are people invested in promoting these messages for generally marketing reasons, and that those messages are not going to serve them well.
I want to talk a bit more about fairy tales at a later stage, but you've said too, for example, some of the TV that you enjoy. Let's take a program like The Bachelor. I made myself stop watching it because I was worried that I was actually enjoying it. Do you think that, as a discerning adult, we should allow ourselves to watch and enjoy that kind of thing?
I think so long as you understand the problems, absolutely. It's difficult, though, because as long as we consume and watch these shows, we're demanding the supply. And so at some point we do have to put our feet down and say enough, stop supplying us with nonsense. But The Bachelor is so ridiculous. I can't stop. It's so hard. I tried.
I guess that's the kind of issue that I worry about, that you become addicted to something that you know isn't particularly healthy. Can we dig a bit deeper there? So, you examine it in a sense for your work, because you critique and you write about these things and you separate the fairy tale element from the entertainment element. But is it so easy for people to do that?
No, it's not. And that's why we have to teach more media literacy. We have to get more people understanding what's under the messages that television and movies and music are putting forth. It is difficult, but I also think there's a time and place for entertainment. I think that you can't, sometimes I joke on Twitter that the struggle is taking a break today. Sometimes you do have to step away and just say, you know what, I am going to lie on the couch and I am going to watch 4 episodes of this very trashy show, and I'm going to relax.
What made you start to write essays?
I had written a few when I was in my late teens, early 20s, just angsty, where do I belong essays. But in I think it was 2010, a young girl was gang raped in Cleveland, Texas, and the New York Times wrote an article about it, lamenting the effect that the incident had on the town. And I was appalled because the girl was 10 years old and there were more than 25 rapists. And so this was not just a crime, it was a crime beyond imagination. And so I wrote an essay about how oftentimes when we write about sexual violence, we're careless. And somehow people began to appreciate what I had to say. And so that was the first of many essays to come. And I began to realize that I could talk about this world we live in, or at least how I perceive it.
You also chose to write an essay about your own dark story. When you were sexually assaulted, you were gang raped basically, when you were just 12.
Yes.
Why did you choose to share that story with the world?
I didn't write the essay to share the story with the world.
It was about the Hunger Games initially.
I love the Hunger Games. And as I read the books and found myself reading and rereading them, I started to wonder, why do I love these books so much? And I loved them because the heroine, Katniss, was strong but also weak. She experienced PTSD and trauma lingered for her. And I really appreciated that finally there was an honest depiction of what trauma can look like, and that sometimes you go through something difficult but you're not strong. And that was really powerful for me, and it was a great frame for me to think about what I had been through myself. And so I just wrote the essay, and I generally write everything pretending that no one reads what I write. And so it's not that I had this need to unburden myself to the world, but I wrote this essay and published it, and then again, it was something that resonated with a lot of people. And a lot of women in particular, and some men, have come forward afterwards and just written to me and saying, this has helped me to think about my own past and to reconcile some things I've been through. And so to know that I could help people in that way, even if it was inadvertent, means a lot.
If I can take something that you said in that Hunger Games essay, you said that one of the worst things about that incident was the shaming that took place, how even when you walked into the classroom the next day and the other kids and the teachers seemed to know from the boys' perspective what had happened, the feeling of shame was almost unbearable. Mm-hmm. Can you talk to me about that? Because that's almost the unspoken of emotion in a lot of trauma, isn't it?
It was absolutely just that other people knew, and not only that, but that they had told a very different story. They had said that I wanted it and that I was the ringleader, which is absurd. And it hurt so much, but what also hurt was that everyone else believed it, and they wrote slut on my locker, and just for the rest of that school year, I was tormented, and I was that girl, and I wasn't that girl, and so that was really difficult, and quite honestly, that hurt almost more than the attack itself.
Why did you choose not to tell your friends and family at the time?
I was scared. And I was embarrassed, and I was ashamed, and I thought my parents would be mad at me. It's absurd. I was 12. Why would they be mad? But at the time, because they were strict and because I was a good Catholic girl and you can't have sex before marriage, I really thought, oh, man, I can't tell anyone. And so I didn't.
When they did eventually find out, when was that?
Last year.
They found out last year?
Mm-hmm.
Was it after reading the essay?
No, they found out by reading an article in Time magazine about me. And my mom sort of knew, but that's when they really found out. And so they were not thrilled.
So this is nearly 30 years after the incident.
Yes.
Can I butt in? What was the conversation around that Time magazine article?
Well, my dad called me and he said that he had read this article in Time magazine, and that was sort of at least the entrance. And because I had read the article, I knew what he was talking about. And then slowly but surely over the ensuing weeks, we started to have little blurbs of conversation, but mostly I told them it's been how long has it been? 28 years. And I don't really want to talk about this with you. Because their questions, so they filtered a lot of information to me through my brothers, as one does, and sort of that they're angry at these young men and that they want justice for me and that they wish I had come to them and that they would have helped me, but they've been incredibly supportive. And so I know now what I wish I had known 28 years ago, that I could tell them. But, when you're a child and you're scared and you're ashamed, you're not thinking rationally.
How did you find your way back to finding your voice? Was it through writing?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Writing is what has saved me in many different ways. Even when I couldn't tell people what had happened, I was able to write. And I would just write these horrible, stories of trauma for other girls, and it was just me, it was therapeutic. And I know that now. I look at some of that writing now and I'm like, oh, that was trash. But there was an emotional need that I was clearly fulfilling. And the older I've gotten, the more I've been able to shape that voice more effectively and make it less about catharsis and more about looking outward as much as I look inward.
So then you come to write this novel, An Untamed State, which obviously is about a woman who is kidnapped and gets gang raped. It's based in Haiti, the land of your forebears, your parents, and it contains so many of the themes that we've already discussed: privilege, poverty, this whole sexual violence question. You're obviously, as a novelist, going to say, this is completely made up, but obviously it's all those themes come together, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that there's a lot of truth in fiction, and there's a lot of fiction in truth, and it is entirely fiction. But I certainly drew from certain themes in my life, from this examination of privilege that I've done with myself. So the truth is that terrible things happen. And oftentimes they happen for very political reasons. And oftentimes it's women who pay the price.
You said that you wanted the depictions of violence in your book. You wanted to treat it as information. And yet your book is an undeniable page-turner. How do you meld those two ideas?
You know, ever since the book came out, I've heard that it's a page-turner, and that's just dumb luck. I'm so happy because that's the kind of book I like to read, and so I'm really glad that that's what happened. But I sort of wrote it hanging on, like I was on the edge of my seat writing it, and I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't think I could write a novel. I told myself, okay, I'll just write 100 short stories and smush them all together. And so, you know, when I was writing the violence, I wanted the reader to feel uncomfortable and to have to look away. I didn't want it to be pretty or stylized, but I also didn't want it to be exploitative or gratuitous. And so it was difficult to keep that high energy and that pace and also think of the violence as information, but I just tried to find the right balance.
You also discuss privilege in the face of crushing poverty. And this is something we have even in this society with, I suppose, the divide between the Indigenous population and the rest. Is this something, it's good for us to read it, we get moved while we read the book, and then we go back to our lives, I suppose. Is this inevitable, or is there something different we can do with our so-called privilege?
Well, I think it's important to recognize that these kinds of things happen throughout the world. It could happen in Haiti, the United States, Australia, Japan. It happens everywhere. And poverty is a global problem. And so those of us with privilege, what can we do? We can bring attention to these issues in whatever way we can, but we can also help people who are directly affected by these issues speak their own stories. I think a lot of times we tend to think that we need to mediate the stories of others, and so I increasingly want to help people to speak their own stories. So, you know, here's the microphone, take it. I don't need to speak for you. And I think that's definitely something we can do when we have privilege.
You've said that you write to think through what it means to be in this world. I definitely write to reach other people, but I write for myself first. Is that really true?
Oh yeah, writing is just for me, and I'm lucky that other people want to read it. Writing is the way I relax. It's my happy place. It's where I go when I'm angry or upset. I just like to write. It's fun.
You've been very visible in the last few weeks on your tour of Australia. Do you like that visibility?
I don't like it at all. I have struggled. That's been the hardest part of the past year with my books doing so well. The dream was to write the books and have them published. So I didn't anticipate that it would go beyond that and then go beyond that even more. And so it's taking some adjusting.
You've also said that you have a dangerous level of confidence to balance my generally low self-esteem.
Yes.
How can you have low self-esteem given the response and reaction to you in Australia?
Well, for every compliment, there's some asshole on Twitter who's telling me how terrible I am. Like last night, there was a guy on Twitter who called me an ogre, a big black ogre, and said some other really hateful things. And
don't you just click block?
That too. I did block him. And I reported him, and Twitter said, no, that's not bad enough for us to do anything about it. And and then there are the criticisms, and I try not to pay too much attention, but I'm a very delicate flower.
Why do you think our society hungers for heroes?
That's a great question, and it's something that I ask myself quite a lot. I think we're desperate for heroes. We're desperate to believe that there are people who have the strength of conviction to do and make choices that we are unable or unwilling to make for ourselves.
I notice in the coverage of even events in Australia, a small girl rescues someone or a dog from the ocean, and she's given an award. Firemen, 9/11, the
Yes.
stories of all the heroes there. Is that, in a sense, humans seeking larger than human qualities?
Absolutely. And I think sometimes it's merited. When I look at 9/11 and I look at those men and women who lost their lives and who worked on those sites for so many months to try and bring out the bodies and to try sift through what had happened, I think that is heroic, but it's also part of the job. But when an average person does something extraordinary, are they really a hero, or are they just being a good person that day? I think sometimes we have to raise the bar for heroics, and I don't think we have to give everyone an award for doing good. I think we just all need to do good more often so that these instances of good don't feel so heroic.
We were speaking a little bit earlier about fairy tales, and the big fairy tale that's been around for a while for a lot of small children, particularly girls, is Frozen. In your books, is that a good fairy tale?
Absolutely, absolutely. Frozen is one of those movies that I've seen many times, but haven't seen once in a way that I can understand what's going on, because I've always watched it with my nieces, and they stop and they pause and they jump and they sing and things happen, and they actually know the dances. It's absurd. It's absurd, but awesome. But I think that it's a story about Elsa and Anna, and they stay the focus of the story. And I really do love that, and I'm all for Frozen.
If you were to write the fairy tale of your life, what would be the next stage?
Oh, God, retirement.
You're only in your 40s, aren't you?
I know, I'm 40, yeah. The next stage in my fairy tale will definitely be settling down and quitting my day job and writing full time.
Are you a worrier?
Oh, yeah, constantly. I worry about everything. It's obsessive.
What kind of things do you worry about?
Oh my God, are my boobs sticking out too much in this shirt? Who's staring at me? Did I finish this? How many deadlines am I missing today? Oh my God, why haven't I heard from this person? Why hasn't she emailed me back? What are my brothers doing right now? Is everyone okay? Oh, it's awesome in my head.
It's very busy.
Yes.
Roxanne Gay, it's been a great pleasure. Thank you for speaking with 1+1.
Thank you, Jane.
1+1 is available on iView. You can browse the archive or contact us through the website. Stay in touch and leave comments via Facebook. You can also follow me on Twitter. I look forward to your company next time. From me, goodbye.